to the T5 peeps, Bob the Dragon, Datamagnet, Cat Crab Lobster, Duck Machine, Astraya the Dreamer, Mezec, Feudic Jarl, and Casper Arnholtz, thank you very much. The Unbreakable Parade, written by chengelao. Of course, there was once a time that I despised human music. To the delicate elven tastes, their music is harsh and savage, filled with sharp percussions, shrill fifes, and obnoxiously loud horns. I used to joke that if you had the war drums of the Orcs and the horn blows of the Dwarves playing at the same time, you would get human music. Even now, I find their music difficult to listen to for prolonged periods of time. Nonetheless, I gained an appreciation of their music. This song you hear currently, it's a tribute to an Unbreakable Parade. You must have heard of the Unbreakable Parade, yes? It was only 50 years ago, in the opening battle in the Fourth War of the Alliance. You haven't heard of it? Then allow me the honor of giving you a first-hand recount. I was sent by the sage elders to defend the forest of Garrick with haste. It was a small forest at the frontier of Alliance lands, and a halfling agent had informed us that the Orcs had amassed an army numbering in the thousands not far from it. I had requested for reinforcements from our allies and neighboring forests, of course. The nearby dwarves, as stubborn as they usually are, sent a couple of their pike squares that they're so proud of. Reinforcements from nearby forests were no less abundant. These combined with the Garrick garrison and my personal unit meant that we had a combined force of 4,000 elves, 3,000 dwarves. Then the human detachment had yet to arrive. But I had considered them a negligible factor at the time. Just with the forces I had on hand, I felt I could easily repel the oncoming Orcs. I took the combined elven-dwarven army and rode out towards the Orc camp. When I engaged the Orcs in open field, however, I realized how wrong I was. The halfling had informed us that they numbered in the thousands. His information was wrong by a factor of 10. After a series of failed opening skirmishes, I decided to quickly retreat back to Garrick. Now realizing the scale of the oncoming threat, I decided to evacuate the population of Garrick. The forest would not be well supplied enough for a siege, and we wouldn't have enough strength to saute. As I was preparing the evacuation, the human contingent had finally arrived. In my 300 years of experience, the human armies were always the ones that would change the most. In the Second War of the Alliance, the humans were mostly militia, hastily given arms to defend their lands. In the Third Alliance, they had modeled themselves after the dwarven pike squares with mixed success. This time, however, they seemed to bring a parade instead of an army. They wore identical fluorescent garbs over their white legwear. A tall, black cylindrical hat with white plumes and golden embroidery helped give the illusion that these humans were taller than they really were. They carried on their shoulders firearms that would undoubtedly be far cry from the dwarven rifles in accuracy, or elven bows for speed and reliability. Not one of these men had the slightest degree of armor. And of course, at the front of the marching column was a small orchestra, which played a human parade piece. I forget the name of the piece, but I believe it was named after a particular heroic group of humans who emerged victorious from the Third Alliance. My first reaction was one of fury. I wasn't expecting much from the humans to begin with, but to send a troop of entertainers in response to a call to arms seemed a grave insult. It was only after much assurance from the lead human commanders that they convinced me that they were indeed military soldiers instead of a passing circus that my ire was quelled. They explained to me that they were the second-line regiment, the Unbreakables, and proudly displayed their banner, no less fluorescent than their uniforms, and their unit name etched into its fabric. A line of regiment, approximately 1,000 human infantry soldiers, they said. Considering their small size and their human nature, I was naturally skeptical of their self-proclaimed unbreakable status. As irritated as I was with the token human force, I had more urgent matters to deal with. and I got on with the evacuation of Garrick. Doing so had taken longer than expected and had allowed the Orc army to catch up. After discussing with my dwarven and human counterparts, we agreed that the evacuation of Garrick's populace was the highest priority. As such, it was decided that the evacuation would proceed with Garrick garrison as its escorts, while the remaining forces would delay the Orc advance. As per the usual formation was to have the sturdy dwarven formation in the front and center of the action, while the more mobile owls make up the flanks, striking with opportunity. The humans of questionable reliability, as always, would act as reserve. Of course, by the time it comes down to that, the battle would be already lost. The following morning, when the fog had yet to lift, we parted with the population of Garrick and formed our ranks. The Orcs, who outnumbered us vastly, clashed with us the moment they saw us. While I'm no fonder of the dwarves of any elf, we all must admit that the dwarves have a tenacity for battle. They held their ground against the insurmountable odds, even as the Orcs smashed against them time and time again. While our own warriors and archers fought well, I doubt that we would have been able to buy enough time for the evacuation, if not for the little bearded men. But alas, this tale is not theirs, and the dwarven formation broke under the pressure, after nearly a full day of fighting. When they did, all hope was lost to me. I sounded for the general retreat and regrouping, although a rout was already in sway. Our own warriors, lacking in discipline compared to other races, saw the flight of the short-legged dwarves as a sign to call it quits. Some took a fighting retreat, while others simply ran for their home forests. It was in the bleakest of moments, when the sun seemed to be setting for me one last time, that they came. They marched in a series of long, thin, ranked lines, with the banners soaring. And at the front of the rank, at the very center of it all, was their orchestra, smashing at their drums and blaring away on their horns and fifes. Just like they had paraded their way into Garrick, these human soldiers were now parading their way into battle. It seemed foolish to me at first, but as I made my escape, I couldn't help but notice the drum beats. They weren't like the war drums of the Orcs, like I had joked in the past. They were anything but warlike, in fact. They were jovial, where you could hear the drumming and beat with the slow footsteps. There was almost a skip in the beat, making you eager to put your foot down in pace with the drums. And the fifes and horns seemed to make the whole image both more inspiring and more jarring. It was a parade tune, of course, a song of victory and triumph, a song of cheer and celebration. Why would the humans be playing a song of joy at a time of certain defeat? When I saw the faces of the human soldiers, however, it made sense in a sort of mad, twisted way. Human soldiers had, in the past few alliance wars, been the meekest and most unwilling of soldiers that would break at the slightest sign of danger. Not these men. The men of the second-line regimen were walking calmly and surely towards the enemy that outnumbered them 50-1 without a glimpse of fear on their faces. The Unbreakables had their heads held high as their banners and the drum beat in their hearts. They genuinely treated the battlefield as their own ceremonial parade ground. They were mesmerized by the sound of the song, the sound of invincibility. I tried to order them into following the general retreat, but I could not make myself heard over their hypnotic orchestra. The most reaction I could ever get from the marching band was a few funny looks from their command staff or sergeants as they had the regiment line open a hole to avoid colliding with me, only to fill it again as soon as they walked past. And this happened regardless of what happened in the face of the regiment. The retreating dwarves and the elves were filtered through their ranks in the same way I was, even as the human soldiers kept advancing. Segments of the regiment would only stop briefly to discharge their weapons before continuing their march with great pomp. Soldiers in the rear ranks taking up positions of the fallen, continuing to stride forward as the dead were still in their ranks. The last I saw of the second line regiment was their thinning line, still holding against the onslaught of the Orcs, the orchestra drumbeat still vibrating in the ground beneath me, even as the orchestra suffered losses. Their backs against the sun I was running towards, glowing like a vibrantly colored leaf being washed away by an endless river of Orcs. To this day, I will never forget the looks of those stoic human faces as they strode into the demise in ceremonial style. Understand that the second line regiment earned their name. To the very end, they held that song of victory. They lived and died to a human tune that convinced them of their invincibility. The song of the Unbreakable Parade. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.